Well, hello. Well, if it isn't chat. Cucumbits, yay! That's true. Hello, everyone. Welcome to chat. Gonna relax for a bit, podcast a bit, let everyone filter in. Hi, Riley. Penis indeed. Who did your background art there? This is James. James7T made this. Friend of the channel, James7T. It was originally for the Nicaea stream. You don't think cucumber exists? Well, why not, Concrete? Am I a bit quiet? Here. Am I quiet, or is the mic loud? Or is the music loud? Sorry. Here. Hello. How am I sounding, ladies and gentlemen, friends and enemies? Music is fine, but I'm a touch quiet. That is odd. Hang on. Anything? Hey, Ugly Melon. Hey, Tara. How am I sounding? Hello. Sounds better to you? Alright. You sound gay? That's true. Well, I literally just turned on streamer mode. Okay, Discord should not boop at me. Maddie PNG Tubers making you smile. Yeah! Candy did an amazing job on the talk sprites for the Nicaea stream. I want to keep using them. Here, someone send me a message on Discord to test if this streamer mode is actually working. Are you for real? Okay, I'm just disabling all sounds on Discord. Somebody send me another message. Okay, alright, we're working now. Alright, sorry for the mic spam earlier. Friday burger has arrived and it's got honey mustard. Hell yes. I found a recipe for samosa filling, and I've been making that for breakfast. Just like, seasoned potatoes and carrots and peas and whatnot. And then in the morning, like, I have like a big Tupperware container of it. And I'll fry it in a pan a little bit like a hash brown for breakfast. With a little bit of a yogurt sauce. That shit is delicious. I know I mentioned this on the previous stream, but learning that I can add just like a little bit of lime juice to some Greek yogurt and it makes a sort of bootleg tzatziki, that's been a game changer for me. You need mustard pilled today? Oh. Is that good? My drag persona is Mike Spam. He loves canned food and gaming, and he eats directly from the can with no noise suppression. He does ravioli ASMR. Candy and I were talking the other day before stream, like, what do you do if, okay, you're at like an office job, and then you see that one of your coworkers has removed from his lunchbox a water balloon filled with ravioli, and he's walking slowly towards the microwave. Like, do you stop him? Why am I streaming when you have to go to work? To hurt you. Yeah, I was thinking you spectate. I wouldn't stop that. Hi, Cinemachine. Ask him for a suck of the ravioli teat. Perhaps. Like, there's no way that it goes well. Like, he's gonna do it, and it's gonna pop in the microwave or whatever. And then, let's say that he just, like, scoops it up in his palms and carries it back to his desk. Like, do you just go back to work, or do you, like, tell someone about it? Is it tied off? Yeah, it's tied off. In my head, he has, like, a little plastic cooler that's filled with other water balloons full of ravioli that he brings to work. That's like his lunchbox. Not your problem. Go back to work. That's probably the wise choice, right? How do you know it's full of ravioli? You can smell it. Everything your senses tell you says that it's distinctly ravioli. My ravioli senses are tingling. Azaler, I imagine that the water balloon is unwieldy large. Like, just manipulating it, just carrying it to the microwave, it looks like it's threatening to pop. We're in the pre-stream right now. You haven't missed anything. Cinemachine, we're talking about what if at your job you saw one of your coworkers with a water balloon full of ravioli and he's walking towards the microwave. Like, do you stop him? Also, sorry if you can hear anything in the background. There's people using a weed whacker outside of my window. Pre-stream can still get you pregnant, so be careful. Crass. Can't hear that? Okay, dope. I don't think you'd eat the balloon, Cinemachine. I think you're putting on airs. I admire your spirit, though. Hi, Hot Sauce Bear. I like that emote. I'm not questioning Cinemachine's aura. I'm saying I respect Cinemachine's aura. I think I'm saying that I like their aura. I don't think you'd eat the balloon. You're lying for clout. Literally. Suspiciously water balloon shaped, yeah. It's okay. You can be crass. Hi, Ariel Shadowcat. Welcome to chat. We're just chilling for a bit, waiting for people to filter in. Bag full of processed cereal grains and ground meat. Ravioli balloon is technically haggis. That's possible, yeah. I would eat a lot of slop for money. Like, there's a lot of slop that it's like genuinely dangerous to eat, but there's a lot of things that I would eat for money. Like, if somebody came up to me and they were like, "Here's some money to eat some balut," you know, the Filipino dish that's like a pickled duck fetus or whatever. Like, I'd try it. Why not? Who cares? It might be yucky, but it's fine. I want to try it at least. Would I eat the Bionicle buffet for money? No, that has, like, nails and screws and rusty syringes and flies and dirt and diseases and sand and mud and dirt and bugs and worms. Those are dangerous things to eat. I would not eat those. And mud daubers. And mosquito larvae. What is goulash? Goulash, but a Midwestern slop? Goulash is not Midwestern, it's Hungarian. Had Nutella and balsamic vinegar and Cheez-Its in it. CT, your Sprite is giving me nostalgia for those old Scholastic stack games based on the, like, Holes, Inkheart, Keys to the Kingdom book. Oh, man. Actually, I've met the author of Inkheart. I've never read those books, but I've gotten really drunk at a gay bar with him. I don't think he's gay. He's just like he used to be roommates with one of my friends, and it was Pride Month, and we wanted to like go out drinking, so we just like drove to Boy Street and got a bunch of margaritas. It was really nice. It was a lovely evening. He seems like just a very nice guy. Like, has the vibe of a lot of professional writers where they're just kind of like some dude. Like, okay, it's like meeting a professional writer who has the vibe of like a carpenter, where it's just like, it's like a trade job to them. Inkheart, it's like a YA series from a couple years ago about like people who can go into books. Coastal Gayborhoods, my beloved. Well, it's like Boy Street is like one of the OG Coastal Gayborhoods. Old Christian edutainment games. I kind of have plans to play those. I think that would be fun. There's a lot of like weird cult games that I would like to play. I think that would be fun to play on stream. Oh, it's actually called Boy Street. I thought you were yucking around. Well, it's It's Sunset Boulevard, but the chunk with all the gay bars is generally referred to as Boy Street. There's like a couple blocks of Sunset Boulevard that has all the gay bars on it. Like every time you see a gay bar in a Hollywood movie, it's one of the bars on Boy Street. It's also like Boy Street is like the border between West Hollywood and Beverly Hills. So like you go over like one street and it's like a really nice neighborhood where the only people who actually own houses there are like Saudi Arabian billionaires. Hey, you got my coat? Welcome. Thank you for the subscription. I appreciate it. You need to get your gay bar up. I don't like bars in general. Like I'm not a like go out to bars type of person. And the bars on game on ugh. The games on Boy Street, the bars on Game Street, the boys on Game Street. The bars on Boy Street are like these are for the party clubbing gays. Like I went to one of the clubs for a poetry reading actually, which was pretty cool. But I've never been to a one of the gay clubs on Boy Street for like actual clubbing. That'd be very intimidating. I am a monk. I am not used to loud noises. Going to a Pride Street party next week and I'm going to drink Doritos and eat fries. Hell yes. Up top. Oh my god. You guys probably don't know this, but a couple years ago, there was like some internal Hollywood gay drama. So there's actually 2 LA Prides for a couple years, where it's like the West Hollywood people split off from the rest of LA Pride and did like their own Pride thing in West Hollywood. And it was okay. It was fun walking around and like seeing everybody at the bars, but like it was way worse than LA. It's like the city like shuts down for LA Pride. It's crazy. Last time I went to like a Pride parade in LA, they like the local like pavers union had a float where they were just driving this massive machine down like through the streets, and it had a bunch of gay flags on. It was like, whoa, they have the contraption is gay, that's awesome. It was like the one thing I remember about that parade. There were a lot of like banks. I think there should be less banks and more machines. Exactly. I like knowing that whatever local pavers guild in LA is like, you know what we should do? We should join the Pride Parade. That's cool. Concrete truck at the Pride Parade would go hard. It would. It simply would. I'm really glad that I went to a Pride Parade in LA. It was like a whole day event, and it was very crowded and like hard to find anywhere to sit down, and it's usually on a really, really hot weekend in June. So I don't know if I'm gonna like go back to them, but I'm really glad that I went, and I'm really glad that it's like a big thing that everyone can go to. I do think there should be more parades in general. Parades are fun. Common Mardi Gras W. That's true, yeah. My favorite part of one of my other favorite part of the Pride Parades was seeing Dykes on Bikes. That shit was cool. Yeah, it's like a lesbian biker group. Shit's cool. They're all very butch. Exactly. It's like you got motorcycles, you got butch women. Like, what more do you want? You need one to ruin your life? No, you don't. You need stable income. Don't lose focus. We have a lesbian marching crew called the Pussyfooters. That's cool. Lock in! Focus! That's such a good NL clip. I need a woman with a wolf cut to ruin my life. No, you don't! We also have a bunch of old men who ride motorized lazy boy recliners and smoking jackets. That rules. I recently learned about the fucking, it was like the New York Fat Men's Club. There's all these images of, like, dudes in really nice suits that have, like, there was, like, a minimum weight requirement of, like 240 pounds or something. Or no, it was like 200 pounds. Type of thing where these days you can be 200 pounds and, like, not be fat at all. You can still be hella skinny. Like, imagine getting kicked out of the New York Fat Men's Club for not being fat enough. We should bring that back. I think they should be like the Masons. They should have, like, secret rites and shit. I need a bald man to yell at me until I'm capable of doing my chores, but in a gay way, not in a Full Metal Jacket type way. I think there's a lot of more overlap than you may be admitting to there, Riley. Now, I don't think those are the same kind of way, but I think they're a very similar kind of way. Like, they can be the same kind of way, but it's not inherently the same kind of way. It's a lot of, like, emic versus edic analysis here. Like, how are you experiencing that versus how is everyone else experiencing that? Center of the Venn diagram is Tyler Durden. Kinda, yeah. Early Leathermen were all veterans. Yup. That's true. Summoning a sweaty, muscular 18th century Ronin to tell me to get to work. That could be possible. If you think about that hard enough, it might happen. pretty hard to find a Ronin these days. Trust me, I've checked. Because of woke. 18th century is also, if I recall correctly, that's pretty late for a Ronin. Like, they were on their way out once the train started getting introduced to Japan in, like, the mid-18th century. Yeah, good old Abe Lincoln fax machine samurai factoid, exactly. So yeah, you could find a Ronin in the 18th century. They'd be pretty old, though. Yes, Nintendo Card Dracula. Etc., etc. We all know the factoid. Pulling a Ronin out of retirement for one last gig. That happened a lot, as far as I'm aware. But a lot of what they were trying to do was, like, reinstall a shogunate, that type of thing. Steam power killed the samurai star. That's true. The one last gig is yelling at you in a gay way. I feel like you guys are maybe mishandling your Ronin. I feel like a Ronin could be a lot more useful than just for gay yelling. I learned the other day that the American term tycoon comes from a mispronunciation of the Japanese term tycoon, meaning great lord. And people coined the term to refer to Abraham Lincoln. So we kind of had... he's kind of the great American daimyo. Stop commanding your Ronin to do homoerotic things. We are being invaded. Just got back from a horrible summer school class with lunch. Well, lunch is nice. It is funny that the 1850s had weeaboos. Like, all those French people that, like, bought kimonos and stuff and, like, wore Japanese fashion in the 1850s because they were just, like, obsessed with Japan. Truly the ancient European and, like, Anglosphere tradition of what if life was more like Japan. And they were Dutch. And they were Dutch. Yeah, literally, Edward Said voice, it is the course of history. Oui, abord. I believe the actual term was Japonisme. The Uno reverses Paris syndrome. Yeah. It's that one tweet where it's like, somebody was in the Japanese countryside and it was like, this shit looks like Sedona. No, Paris syndrome is conceptually very funny. Because it's like, you know that has to have happened to other people throughout history. That cannot be like a unique thing to like Japanese and Chinese culture. Like, that cannot solely be an East Asian thing. There has to be people that, like, learned about a fancy city and then went there and it was kind of shit. It was kind of how Napoleon described like going to Egypt, where they got around and it was like the decline of the Ottoman Empire or whatever. And so they see all these like 4,000 year old monuments that people have just kind of been like writing graffiti on them. Man, the real thing sucks, actually. Exactly. This happens to Midwesterners going to New York? Maybe. I think it happens to, like, Midwesterners traveling to the capital city of their own state. Like, people who live in small town Nebraska feel that way about going to Omaha. People are like, I don't know if I can handle the hustle and bustle of the big city of Omaha, Nebraska. Did I hit a little too hard for the Nebraskans in chat? Don't like how big Wichita is? Wichita's like 4 city blocks in LA. The lamer people in Seattle area feel that way about Portland, Oregon. But Seattle's bigger than Portland, though. Why? All right. Ladies and gentlemen, friends and enemies, we've been podcasting long enough. Do you want to talk about Judaism and esoterica? Are you ready to fill the field with cucumbers? Sorry, going over my notes. Gonna pull something up. It's gonna be cool. Okay. No, we're not going Kabbalah here. Kabbalah does not show up until like the 15th century. We are in ancient Judaism. Kabbalah, like, the Zohar says that it's from this period, but it's not. All right. So, for those that are not aware, there's a religion called Judaism, right? We all understand this. So, the reason that all of this is important, the reason that we have to talk about this is, okay, I study Western esotericism, right? Shalom. Merkava mysticism time. Yes, Riley. We will eventually talk about the Merkava and Hechelo literature. So, we got 2 important terms here. The thing that I study, and the thing that, by attending this stream, you are all temporarily students of, is Western esotericism. And we've talked a little bit about the term esotericism, right? We've talked about methods of hiding and reading things and preserving secrets. But it's time for us to really tuck into what the Western there means. And there's a lot of different terms and definitions that you can pick for Western, but given the thing that we're studying, the most useful definition I've found of Western in Western esotericism is the intellectual tradition that starts with the intersection of Hellenic philosophy and Jewish monotheism. Kind of once those 2 things hit each other, you've got the Western intellectual tradition. All following along so far? Okay, dope. Nods. Hi, Kyralis. Welcome to chat. So, the thing about this, oh, this feels like going uphill on a roller coaster. So, okay, if you were here for our earlier streams about, say, okay, Gyre's been cooked. We need to, sorry, hang on, doing Warframe things. So, the thing, if you were here for our earlier streams about, let's call it, you know, Plato and Aristotle and whatnot, those had the benefit of sources that were collected in a single place that was, you know, focused on one author. They were very easy to study. It was very easy for me to do a single episode of just like, here's Plato, here's what he's talking about. Tackling a subject like Jewish esoterica in the ancient world is a lot more difficult because there's not only a lot of it, but there's a lot of disagreement over it, both within and without Judaism, right? So for a quick, very, very quick history, the Jewish people emerge from the mists of prehistory around the Bronze Age, where they found a kingdom, right? It is then destroyed by the Neo-Babylonians, and this gives us the Babylonian captivity, right? They're not allowed to practice their religion, or they are, but with specific strictures placed upon them by the conquering army. It's not a fun time. They're taken away from the land of Judea and kept in captivity, right? This is the period when the thing that we currently now understand as the Talmud, like the Old Testament to the Christians, starts to develop. And it's very slowly. It's very, very slow. It's a combination of like Bronze Age sources, oral mythology, and people figuring out what to do now that your religion based around a temple that you built in Judea no longer has a temple, right? And then, okay. Sorry, looking at my notes. This is important history. I don't want to get it wrong. Okay. And then the Achaemenid Empire comes along. They take over the Neo-Babylonians, right? And they're way nicer to the Jews. And so the Achaemenid Empire is regaled as liberators in a lot of ways, the Achaemenid Persians. That becomes interesting once you start getting into the history a little bit, because the Achaemenids are like the great villains of the Hellenic world. You know, they are the way that like Western people have always kind of seen Arabs coming over from Turkey and Asia Minor and whatnot. It's like the Achaemenids are the great villains of Greek mythology, but the Jews are pretty okay with them. They have their issues, but they're a lot less hard on them. And the reason why, yeah, the Achaemenids are the bad guys in the movie 300. Yes. That's also kind of how they were treated in Greek mythology too, as these like, just like almost monsters. So when the Achaemenids take over, they allow a lot of the Jews to return back to Judea and build another temple. And this is really great. The Jews are very happy for this. And they're so happy that their temple cult immediately fractures into like a million different pieces. As with any big historical change that causes like a big change in how religious and political power flows through your society, it immediately becomes very sectarian. And this is kind of where this is where the history becomes easier. most of the sources before this period are archaeological, right? We get stelae and objects from middens or trash piles and stuff. But at this point, schism, yay! Literally, that's how you know a religion is happy. Yeah. It's a healthy religion will have a healthy level of schismatics. But once you hit the Second Temple period, okay, the First Temple is the one built by King Solomon using demons and et cetera, et cetera. That's the semi-legendary one. The Second Temple, the Temple of Herod, is the when most people talk about like the Jewish temple cult, this is the thing they're talking about, right? And so now you've got your temple back that your temple cult was based around, but you've also got this literature that you developed in captivity and in the Babylonian diaspora. And you're trying to combine that with, like, you've gotten access to, like, papyrus. You have, because you're not in captivity anymore, you can be scribes now. And so the thing we know of as the Talmud really starts to take shape in this period. And it's a combination of, you know, oral histories and things people wrote down and arguments over the arguments over the meanings of other stories, and then there's commentaries on those commentaries and commentaries on the commentaries. I forgot to upgrade Nidus. Shit. But it's all basically arranged into 3 big sections. I forget which one is which, but it's basically like mythology, teachings, and commentaries, right? And then you get commentaries on those commentaries and commentaries on the commentaries, and everything in this period is still centered around the temple cult itself. But you've also got tanky hunk of infestation, they'll survive. Okay, that's good. Okay, checking my notes, trying not to die in Warframe. Okay. But then you get to kind of the early classical period. You get to like 330 BC. You get Alexander the Great doing his whole thing. He's showing up. He's doing everything. And when the Babylonian captivity ended for the Jews, not all of them went home. A lot of them were just like fine with wandering around. And this starts like this kind of starts a trend throughout Western history. Whenever you get other Westerners, whenever you get like Greeks, Romans, whatever the dominant culture of the time is, you get Jews. Wherever they go, the Jews go. So everywhere that Alexander the Great conquered, you see communities of Hellenic Jews popping up. Why didn't they use demons to build another temple? I guess they didn't need to, but also, like, they didn't have King Solomon's, like, legendary wisdom, you know? Yes, and this is around the period when they formally... Oh, hey, nice. This is around the period when they formally compiled the Bible in Alexandria. Notably, though, in Greek. The thing you have to remember about this period is that, especially at this point in history, most Jews did not speak a lick of Hebrew. It was very rare for your average Jewish person to speak Hebrew. The common tongue of the time was Greek. Do you know if the Samaritans had any esoteric component to them? We'll get there. We're leading up to it. So, actually, we're kind of going to get there now. So, around this time, you've got a lot of Jews kind of in a lot of places, right? And a lot of them aren't religious, they're secular, or a common thing of this time is like people taking things from Hellenic culture and then kind of Judaizing them, right? Like learning new things, then thinking, how do we apply this to Judaism? And the notable thing about Judaism at this period of time is that it is hardcore monotheist in a way that very few of the surrounding cultures are. That is one of the most unique things about Judaism of the period, is their dogmatic and cultural focus on monotheism. However, not all of them were monotheist. Every time you talk about, like, we're ancient Jews, monotheists, someone brings up the small community of Jews on the Elephantine Islands, which were probably a garrison stationed from one of Alexander's wars, who practiced a form of Judaism that had a duotheist kind of arrangement to it, in which they worshipped both the single male, like, Yahweh-derived god and his consort, his wife, or concubine. It changes depending on how you interpret the text. Yeah, the Elephantine Temple. It's this around this period. If you find like Jewish temples from this period of the Hellenic diaspora, like people were remixing Judaism all over the place, and that's another theme that you find throughout studying Judaism. There has never been one Judaism, ever. That has never actually existed. We can kind of point towards like dominant and normative forms of Judaism, but there's never been one Judaism. Not in the same way that, and especially not in the same way that people try to talk about it now. This is different from Metatron and the two gods in heaven thing, right? So, the Book of Enoch has a lot of Jewish elements in it. There's a lot of debate as to like how exclusively Jewish the Book of Enoch is, but they're a little later than this as well. We think it's hard to conclusively date the Book of Enoch from what I understand, because all we have is like a copy of a copy of a copy. But the Enochian Jews were another sect from a little later than this, right? And this just goes to illustrate that, like, there was never, despite their monotheism, there was never one Judaism that was conclusively practiced by every Jewish person. And so that begs the question, like, okay, well then, what are the qualities that every Jewish person had? Like, what defines Judaism in this period? And there really isn't one. Like, every statement that you can try to make about, like, every Jew in the 3rd century BCE believed this, you can find some Jewish community within the diaspora that does not believe that. However, there is a kind of like familial resemblance between all of these different things. Yes, synagogue is a Greek word, as is Jew itself. So remember when I said that like Judaism immediately fractured upon getting their temple cult back? Well, part of that was the fact that, you know, they had their temple cult, but the Achaemenids were a pretty Hellenized people. Like at least the Achaemenids that were hanging out in like Judea, Syria, Palestine, like that whole area was very Hellenic, partially because like Koine Greek was the trade language of the time. It was what everyone spoke if you wanted to buy products. So, this is solid info. Yay! So, this is where this is kind of where the Bible comes in, right? And the other big source for this period, what is Yahwism? Yahwism is the pre-Jewish temple cult. It's like, it wasn't quite Jewish, but it wasn't not Jewish. It's like the Israelite religion before the Babylonian captivity. And some texts and artifacts from the Babylonian captivity have elements of this version of, like, that version of Proto-Judaism in it, right? It's why God in the Talmud and the Tanakh and the Torah, it's why they have so many different names. Like, the many different names of God are probably relics of these earlier forms of Judaism, or like diasporic forms of Judaism that were then kind of recombined into the broader canon of Judaism. And that is a trend that will continue for pretty much the rest of Jewish history. There's a lot of like constant reinterpretation and commentaries on texts that is part of what defines Judaism as like a religious culture. It also Riley in chat says it's also syncretized heavily with Greek, Canaanite, and Egyptian cults. Like their Yahweh is very similar to Osiris and Dionysus. Yes, it's like basically anywhere there were Jews, Judaism picked up elements from those culture. But they're always in a notably Judaized form, right? And we are spiraling in to the actual magic conversation. We will get there, don't worry. Where do the Maccabees come into this? That is an excellent question, because you've got this. The Achaemenid Persians are a Hellenic culture that's been kind of like, they exist in relative harmony with Judaism. They're allowed to participate in, like, Jews are allowed to participate in their temple cult without being harassed too much. But as empires decline, they have to kind of tighten their belts culturally and economically. And so at a certain point, the kind of provincial governor of Judea at the time was getting into a bit of a spat with the temple cult, saying like, oh, what was they were like, maybe we should put a statue of Zeus in the temple, which if they did that, it would have caused outright rebellion, right? Trying to Hellenize the Jews even further, and that caused a lot of problems, because at this point, Judaism is a Hellenic culture, right? Like, especially in the land of what is now Palestine. Like, Jews were a Hellenic culture, but a lot of them had a strong sense of identity. And so you get a lot of different sects popping up that want kind of a say in what exactly Judaism is going to mean going forward. And then eventually, the Greek world transitions into the Roman world as the Romans take over, and you get sects. You get a sect of Jews that are like, you get the Maccabees, right? They really do not like being Hellenized. They are a highly traditionalist, nationalist group who, if you put them into modern political terms, they would be pretty similar to the Taliban, like highly traditionalist, very, very no fun, seeing anyone deviating from Jewish law as like decadent, and their why Jewish identity has fallen so much. But at the same time, they're very militant and highly nationalist, and that's a good group of people to have on your side if your provincial governor is overstepping his bounds, right? But they were also not the only game in town. This is where you get the Pharisees and the Sadducees, and the what was the third one? The Essenes, the mysterious Essenes, who were only mentioned by Josephus. That's also where a lot of this history comes from. Is basically you had Flavius Josephus, who was a Greek Jew, who basically became a retainer for the provincial, like one of the provincial Roman lords, and not only rejected rejected the Jewish rebellions in Judea, but like actively assisted the Romans in like reconquering the area and like oppressing the Jews who actually lived there. But at the same time, he clearly likes Judaism and put in a lot of work to make sure that like the history of Judaism was recorded and respected and understood by the Romans as something worthy of civilization in a Roman definition of the term. Josephus, mental gymnastics king. He's one of my favorite like ancient authors, just because of like the simultaneous like collaboration with the Romans, but also like he's clearly excited to talk about Judaism and Jewish history. But Josephus mentions these three big sects. You've got the Pharisees, the Essenes, and the Sadducees. So the Sadducees were the remnants of Judea's old kind of like priestly aristocracy, right? These are the people who actually managed the temple cult and had a lot of political power from being the people who did that. Then you had the Pharisees, who... Nidus is 1-2 combo seems good. Okay, I don't know how to play Nidus, so thank you. So the Pharisees were kind of the nerds of Judaism at the time. They were scribes, philosophers, but also notably Hellenized, right? The Pharisees were the people who they added. The Maccabees did not like the Pharisees because the Pharisees were the ones. Always pronounce it Sadducees. I don't actually know how it's pronounced. My pronunciation could be incorrect here, but I've always seen it Sadducees or Sadducees. But regardless, the Pharisees were fairly Hellenized. They were not incredibly Hellenized, but they were fairly Hellenized. So the Pharisees are what became modern rabbinical Judaism and modern Christianity. Was the death of Christ a Revenge of the Nerds type situation? Kind of. So the Pharisees had kind of two sects within them, and it was basically the sort of scribal sages who believed in preserving the Torah, because when the Romans took over and destroyed the Second Temple and looted it, they were like, well, fuck, we made a whole damn temple cult, and now our temple's gone again. Well, what do we do? And they were like, well, we've still got the covenant, right? Thank you, Jamie. They had two sects, let's go! Exactly. So, they're like, well, fuck, our temple's gone, and we had a temple cult, but we've still got the covenant, and we've still got all the writings and the oral traditions, so let's just keep teaching that. And that became the ancestor of modern rabbinical Judaism. The other half of the Pharisees were the apocalyptic ones, who were a little more influenced by Zoroastrianism, right? A little more duotheist, a little more concerned with malicious demons, that type of thing. And they were like, fuck, our temple cult is gone! Everything's going away. Fuck! And the apocalyptic Pharisees became the Jesus movement, or some of them became the Jesus movement, which eventually became Christianity. All clear? We all on board with what's happening here? Any questions? Although, kind of hard to know exactly. It's not like any of them, save for one, really say themselves. We have pretty good... okay, this is the point where my scholarship kind of runs up against a wall. It's my understanding that we have a pretty good understanding that this is where... this is the genealogy of these sects, right? Oh, you were talking about pronouns in Warframe? My apologies, then. Okay. Note check. Oh, yes. So the Pharisees broadly were a Hellenized sect of Jews, but they added many of the things that are now staples of modern rabbinical Judaism, like an afterlife. And the concept of an oral Torah. Which, okay, I said we weren't really going to talk about Kabbalah here, but the groups of the Pharisees that had that talked about the oral Torah, where it's like, oh, you have the written scrolls, where, well, we have the preserved oral teachings of Moses himself, which is also a source of authority for them. That is where the Zohar claims it's from. It claims to be from this unwritten oral tradition that goes back to Moses, right? It's also the John the Baptist movement, of which Jesus might have been an offshoot. It's unclear if the modern-day Mandeans were derived from this. Yes, there was a huge soup of sects all competing and just trying to like exist in this period, which was very apocalyptic and like not fun for a lot of Jews. And we really don't have time to cover all of that, right? If I think it's important whenever you're talking about stuff like this to mention the things that you're leaving on the table, and these are not the only sects. We are just covering the ones that are important for the things that I'm studying here. So around 70 CE, right? Destruction of the Second Temple, the Second Diaspora, all that fun stuff. Sorry, I did not have as much time to prepare for this as I would have liked because I had to spend like a whole day and a half preparing for the stuff with Professor Grimes next week. Which, if you don't know, yeah, next week I'm having Professor Shannon Grimes on the stream. We're gonna talk about Zosimus of Panopolis, on which she is one of the like leading scholars. Very excited for that. A little bit nervous, but more excited than nervous. Okay. Hey, there will be a VOD. Don't you worry. Oh my god. I hate that my music keeps pausing. Like, yes, I'm still watching it. Yes, I'm incredibly excited for Professor Grimes. So, that is like the sort of broad history, right? That is the sort of broad history of Judaism in the ancient world. Once you get past 70 CE, and then about 100 years after that, you get the foundations of modern rabbinical Judaism, right? That's the and that's where we get like from about 70 CE to like 638, I believe, is the rabbinical period, right? And this is when we get the good shit. If you're looking for like magical texts and like, you know, Jewish religious magic, like books of spells and shit, this is where we're getting all that stuff. And this is when we kick into high gear. But before we do that, I want to take a little break. Hey, we'll be back in about 5 minutes. Take a stretch, go get some water, go to the bathroom, all that fun stuff. Hey, I'm back. Hi, everyone. Hi, Jamie. We were eating plums? Well, that sounds lovely. Were they perfect? Aw, kitty. Alright, alright. So, we've now established a very, 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 like, distant, broad base of understanding of Jewish history. There's a lot more of it. Judaism low-key invented the concept of history, but this is what we need for a fun stream about magic. Now we're going to get into the nitty-gritty of it. So, one of the other reasons that Judaism is important for the study of Western esotericism is that they were basically the first people to quibble legalistically about magic. There is, once you hit about 70 CE, a mountain of scholarly, rigorous debate about the definitions of magic within Judaism as a culture and as a religious doctrine. And if you are the type of person who likes studying what magic meant throughout history, this is the good shit, my friends. This is the good shit. There's so much shit in the Talmud about this. It's wonderful. Just to illustrate, I am actually going to begin with a reading from the Babylonian Talmud. So join me for a moment. The warlock is also liable to be executed by stoning. One who performs a real act of sorcery is liable, but one who deceives the eyes, making it appear as though he is performing sorcery, as that is not considered sorcery. Rabbi Akiva says in the name of Rabbi Yeshua, for example, 2 people can gather cucumbers by sorcery. One of them gathers cucumbers, and he is exempt, and the other one gathers cucumbers, and he is liable. How so? The one who performs a real act of sorcery is liable. The one who deceives the eyes is exempt. Now, okay. The interesting thing about that is that term, like, okay, this is from Sanhedrin 67a, right? The word, like, gather cucumbers by sorcery, the words by sorcery were added. Those were added post-translation. So, this brings up the work of one Professor Gideon Bohak, who is a completely secular Jewish historian at the University of Tel Aviv, and he makes one of the best methodologies for discussing magic in history that I have ever seen. Like, this is the gold standard. The first thing that you need to talk about in discussions of historical magic is the emic versus emic versus etic debate, right? There is our understanding of magic. You and me and chat and all of the people living in the year 2025 looking back at these things and looking for magic. That is an outsider's understanding of magic, the etic, I believe. But then, you also need to understand, what does a Jew in, like, in the first century, living in Judea, like, what is he talking about when he talks about filling the field with cucumbers by magic? What exactly does he mean there? What is happening? And understanding his worldview and his feelings on the matter. And to actually properly understand both of these things, we need to understand both of those perspectives at the same time, right? So, like with a lot of historical discussions of magic, the Babylonian Talmud, like, Jews had their own words for magic. Like, I'm using the word magic for ease of translation here, but there are several words that the Talmud uses for, like, forbidden like forbidden practice in Jewish religious jurisprudence. Sorry. Like, and I apologize if I'm pronouncing these incorrectly. It's like the actual term from that gathering of the cucumbers passage that is used in Hebrew is kishuf, which the definition is something akin to trickery. Like, it's also the term that is used to describe stage magic or sleight of hand, right? Pickpocketing. But at the same time, who is allowed to do magic and when is very complex and not something that we're going to get a comprehensive view by the end of this stream. But it is something that, like, if you want to learn about it, there is a ton of discussion in the Talmud about it. Here, let's find the other cucumber passage. In the Mishnah, Rabbi Akiva says in the name of Rabbi Yeshua that two people can gather cucumbers by sorcery, one of whom is exempt, as he merely deceives the eyes, and one of whom is liable, as he performs real sorcery. Quote, moreover, I can teach thee 100 halachot with regard to a snow-white leprous mark, but no person has ever asked me about them. He could not find a student who could fully understand him in those matters. Moreover, I can teach 300 halachot, and some say that Rabbi Eliezer said 3,000 halachot with regard to the planting of cucumbers by sorcery, but no person has ever asked me about them, besides Akiva ben Yosef. Rabbi Eliezer described the incident. Quote, once he and I were walking along the way, and he said to me, my teacher, teach me about the planting of cucumbers. I said one statement of sorcery, and the entire field became filled with cucumbers. He said to me, my teacher, you have taught me about planting them. Teach me about uprooting them. I said one statement, and they were all gathered in one place. After these comments, the sages asked him questions of halacha. What is halacha with regard to the ritual impurity of a ball made of leather and stuffed with rags, and likewise a last, the frame on which a shoe is fashioned, which is made of leather and stuffed with rags, and likewise an amulet wrapped in leather, and a pouch made for pearls wrapped in leather, and a small weight which is wrapped in leather. Rabbi Eliezer said to them, they are susceptible to impurity, and their purification is effected by immersing them in a ritual bath, as there is no need to open them up. That is the type of thing that you see a lot in Talmudic discussions of magic, is like, when does something become ritually impure, and what is tainting them? What exactly is happening that taints these things? Because that features into discussions of, like, what exactly is magic, right? Like, the fact that... Okay, I need to slow down a second. The Bible prohibits magic. You're not allowed to do any of it, right? Are the cucumbers real? I lost the plot a little bit. Okay. So this is a common thing you see in rabbinical literature discussing magic, right? You see two rabbis discussing... they're often legendary rabbis that have supposed powers or did miraculous things, discussing what it means to do magic. Now, remember, people back then believed in angels, right? If you were sick, you could try to abjure an angel, like call it down, try to command it to remove the demons from your son's body. Backtracking a bit, this period is the hotspot for recording magic and stuff because of the apocalyptic outlook. No, but there was a lot of... It's not because of the apocalypticism, it's because there were a lot of people doing Judaism slightly differently, and they were all writing about it, right? So... there are a lot of things within Judaism at this time that, like, people do things that we today would recognize as, like, magic. Like, we would call that magic. But back then, they wouldn't call that magic. They would say, no, I'm not doing magic. I'm doing something else. You just don't, you think it's magic, but I'm actually doing something normal. It's philosophy, or I'm doing monotheism. That's a very common argument within Talmudic discussions of magic, is people saying like, oh no, what I'm doing is not magic. I am abjuring angels, which is totally allowed within Jewish monotheism, right? Even though magic is ostensibly banned by the Bible, no one ever, especially in Judaism, no one ever identifies as a magician. You know, no one in the ancient Jewish world goes around saying like, yes, I'm a magician, I'm a magoi, I do kishuf. No one ever says that. In fact, there's very little evidence that anyone, despite the fact that magic was punishable by the death penalty, there's very little evidence that anyone was ever punished for this. Happens all the time with Christians as well. Every once in a while there's a scandal with somebody going, no, I'm not a wizard, those are prayers. Yes, all of that starts with Judaism. Not even Solomon and his demons. Well, that's different. That's in the Bible. And he wasn't doing magic. He just prayed to God for normal wisdom, right? Like he's using the power of the divine name. It's not magic. The power flows from Adonai. That is another one of the interesting things you see about Jewish magic in this period, is that like you're allowed to adjure angels. You're allowed to like call down an angel and say, "Dear angel, please get this demon out of my son." And you're allowed to go to someone and say, "Please make me an amulet to heal my son." But you're not allowed to adjure God. You're not allowed to say like, "God, I call you down and command you do this thing." But then what is magic? Keep asking, buddy. We are not going to find an answer. Magic is theoretically any practice that would exist outside of the bounds of rabbinical law, right? Like Jewish law. Also, those aren't demons exactly in this Jewish context. They're shadim. Yes, they are shadim, but also at this point, a lot of the people writing these texts are Hellenized Jews. They use the term daemon, like in the sense that Christians use the term daemon to refer to demons. You can't abjure God. Charismatics in shambles right now. Well, see, Honi. Okay, you bring up Honi the Circle Maker as Ayler. So, you've got this period where everyone was competing, like all these fractional elements coming out of Judaism. You've got like, and a really common thing is there's a long tradition of patriarch Jewish holy men, right? Kind of these charismatic Jewish holy men that would wander around Syria and Palestine, conducting exorcisms and like constructing amulets and generally doing holy man things. Jesus was one of them. There were a lot of other ones. And Honi the Circle Maker was this guy who, in a period when there was no rain, there was a great drought, Honi the Circle Maker said, "I'm going to draw a circle on the ground." And he shouted up to God. He said, "God, I'm not leaving this circle until you make it rain." And then it didn't rain. And he kept reaching up and berating God and telling it to rain. Then it started raining a little. And he said, "God, that's not good enough. I need it to rain more." And then it started raining more. And Honi the Circle Maker said, "Thank you." And he erased his circle and went back to his normal business. That type of thing is very much not allowed. Like, that is, from what I understand, that is skirting the outermost edges of you might actually get taken in for heresy. Or not heresy, but like Jewish religious authorities would not be cool with that. But it was just close enough that people are like, that's just Honi doing his thing. It's whatever. Old man yells at clouds, but it worked, right? So the big cornerstone, all this, the big like juicy center, is a book called the Sefer HaRazim. If I recall correctly, it kind of means the Book of Gabriel, related to the idea of wrestling God / wrestling the angel. Kinda, yeah. Well, but like wrestling the god, wrestling the angel is a lot more. That's a lot closer to the spirit that was kind of allowed within Judaism at the period, because it's like the way Judaism conceives of itself is that they made a covenant with God. It's like we signed a contract with this God, and we're going to treat him as our God, right? There might be others that later get like kind of demoted to being malicious spirits, but it doesn't even matter because this God is our God. But we signed a contract. We know the rules. God isn't allowed to add new shit to the contract, right? And so there's a lot of like, there's literally a story in the Talmud of like two rabbis are debating and God descends from the heavens to say that one of them is right. And the rabbis tell him to fuck off, right? They're like, no. We get to debate this. You don't get to say that. Like we are the ones that have to like actually interpret this, right? The Torah is not in heaven. Exactly. And that is the concept that the Torah is not the concept that the Torah is not in heaven. The idea that we are the ones that actually get to interpret the law is what makes space for a lot of what we're going to describe as Jewish magic, right? Is like, well, we get to interpret it. Like God doesn't get to. So there's a lot of things that you can simply argue are not actually magic. Yeah, that's what gets Christians really mad about Judaism, theologically speaking, like, and aside from the anti-Semitism. Yeah. Exactly. Like, that is very much not how Christians interpret their scriptural authority. Like, whenever two Christians disagreed, when two Catholics disagree, it's understood that one of them is objectively more correct than the other one. There is a true Bible, a true interpretation of the law, and you can find that, right? Like you can, through the process of like argumentation and scholasticism, you can arrive at like a refined truth. Wherein Judaism is more about the debate. It's more about the constant reinterpretation and commentaries on commentaries. And so that actually brings us back to the Sefer HaRazim, which is, it was discovered in the Cairo Geniza. Now, within Judaism, if something has a name of God on it, you can't just throw it away. Like, if you're a religious authority, you can't just throw that away. It needs to be kind of ritually buried, given a funeral rite, because that's an object that's got a little bit of God in that. You gotta treat that special. And so there's a part of a lot of synagogues called a geniza, which is kind of like the storehouse where you keep old, kind of broken down holy scriptures that are awaiting burial, awaiting proper ritual disposal. And finding genizas in Cairo, like where the dry air perfectly preserves papyrus texts, is amazing for archaeologists. We know so much about the ancient world because we found unburied texts in ancient genizas. So around the 1960s, a group of archaeologists dug up a geniza in Cairo. This was a medieval geniza, right, from around the 10th century, but it was full of copies of texts that we knew existed back in like the 1st century, back in the era that we're kind of talking about now. And one of these texts was the Sefer HaRazim. And the reason I keep coming back to this is that this is probably the oldest magical text in Western history. Like it's not quite a grimoire, but it's the oldest magical text in all of Western history. I'm so excited to talk about this. It's one of my favorite texts we've ever found. It's like one of the most interesting things in Western esotericism, partially because the Jewish scholar who initially discovered it was like shocked at it. It has it's got everything you could want from a magical text. It's got a weird, like, unorthodox cosmology. It's got lists of spells and methodologies for modifying those spells. Like, it's got variations on the spells, which hint at a broader methodology of magic. And the spells are shit like sacrifice a lion and use its blood to make a potion and shit like that. It's got, like, esoteric names of angels and how you can command them, and all the different effects that they can give you. And the Jewish scholar that initially, like, discovered and translated this text was shocked. He was like, this is not allowed within Judaism. Because it really isn't. It goes against, like, basically all of the legal religious jurisprudence about prohibitions on magic within Judaism. It goes starkly against that. And it just goes to show you that, like, the rabbis, the religious authorities, the arguments in the Talmud were very much not necessarily how the average Jew in the ancient world was participating in things, right? It shows it's very similar to the conversation we had in a previous stream about, like, you know, for like 300 years, the Pauline Christianity was like, stop calling yourselves Jews, we're not Jews anymore. Which, you only have to say that if a lot of the people in your congregation still consider themselves Jews, right? This is the type of shit. The Sefer HaRazim is the exact type of shit that the rabbis of the early rabbinical period were trying to get people to knock the fuck off. And that's why it's cool. Because I know we talked about earlier, nobody was going around identifying as a Magoi. Nobody was saying, hello, yes, I'm a necromancer, I'm a Goas. But it's clear that whoever was writing down the Cairo Geniza was probably someone who was going around making amulets for people. They wouldn't have considered themselves they wouldn't have called themselves like, oh yes, I do kishuf. They would have considered themselves like, oh yeah, it's fine that I'm doing this. It's totally within Jewish law, even though a rabbi would probably take issue with that. There were some stories of the Talmud about how rabbis were expected to be familiar with rituals and processes of witchcraft because they needed to know how to recognize it. Yes, I forget what the term is, but to sit on the sort of highest legal council within Judaism at the time, you had to be a master magician. Like, it says this in the Talmud. Like, no, you need to be familiar with every form of magic, and you need to know how to do all of it so that you can properly prosecute magicians. It's like, you don't practice it, but you need to know how it works and how to do it so that you can recognize it and prosecute it. And that's fascinating. That it calls up the trial of Apuleius, right? Yeah, you needed to master magic shit, but not do it. It brings up a great quote from the trial of Apuleius, who was being tried for magic in the Greek world. And he was like, or Roman world, I forget which one, but he was like, I'm obviously not a magician. If you guys really did think I was a magician, why wouldn't I use magic to get out of legal proceedings? You know, it's like, if you guys actually think I'm a magician, what the fuck do you think locking me in a prison cell is gonna do, right? Roman world, thank you. Yeah, literally, it's like, that's so true. Like, and that's actually another thing that comes up in the Talmud. I forget where. The Talmud is very big, but there's a whole argument about like, okay, we all agree that Judaism has a prohibition about magic, that it's not, you can't do it. But we kind of agree that you can use sacred names to adjure an angel, to like command an angel. So we all agree that that's not really magic, but is adjuring an angel to influence the jury in your trial, is that jury tampering? Like, regardless if it works or not, regardless if people actually believe in magic or in the efficacy of what you are doing, should that be considered jury tampering? And it seems like the rabbinical consensus was, yeah, it should be. Like, you don't do that. Because you got to remember, like, Jews at the time, like, a lot of people believed in angels. People didn't necessarily believe in every form of magic, but they were like, yeah, my son got sick. that's evidence that demons are real. That he's been attacked by a malicious shadim, or by malicious shadim, and I need to abjure the name of an angel. I need to go down to my local doctors and get an amulet. That's another one of the easy. Can you force an angel to pay your parking tickets, or is that like bad? Who knows? There's probably an argument in the Talmud about it. When I light a votive candle for Santa Rita on my exams, is that cheating? Exactly. It brings up a lot of questions for me about, like, modern neo-paganism. It's like, hey, if you put a curse on someone and, like, they break their leg, shouldn't you be liable for assault? Like, if you really, truly believe in magic, right? If you're treating this as seriously as you're saying that you're treating it, you should be in jail, dog. Is it real? More importantly, are there rules about it? It's not, okay, it's not is it real, are there rules? It's, is it real? How should it affect the economy? That, like, that's the other big stepping stone here, is like, well, okay, are you allowed to abjure angels to get out of fraud? But, like, that's how you should treat magic if you take it incredibly seriously. Not, like, less as this, like, broad kind of philosophical and cultural concept. Is this where SBCDH comes from? No. SBCDH comes from a Tumblr post from one of my friends. Like, if you give someone a drink you think is poison, it isn't, and they're fine, you should still go to jail. Exactly, yeah. But also it's like, but is it worth prosecuting, right? It's like, okay, well, somebody commanded an angel to break your leg, and they broke their leg. Is it worth prosecuting that guy for assault? Or are there more pressing matters for the court, right? Isn't that partially why kids who do, like, major exams in China back in the day had to stay locked up for a week so they couldn't cast spells? You know, I don't know. Evil Nerevar, you make a great fucking point. Prosecute the angel. Although, the cosmology around the abjuration of angels in, like, this era of Jewish magic, the idea is that angels have to follow properly formed commands, right? If you write it in the right way, angels can't escape an order as long as the order is properly given, right? It circumnavigates an angel's free will. Although, that it's like, in that case, the angel should be considered the murder weapon, right? You have the motive, you have the opportunity. The angel's just part of the means. Note check. So, okay. We've talked a lot about what a lot of Jewish people, Jewish magicians were doing back then, right? What type of that brings up the question of, like, what type of person was doing this? Like, what did this actually look like on the ground? Like, when you were talking about, like, a person abjuring an angel, what did that actually look like? Do you just, like, stand in a field and say, "Angel, come here," in special words? Well, no. A lot of the physical evidence that we have of, like, angelic magic in this period is textual. Like, one of the big things that we get from that, like, Western civilization and Western esotericism gets from Judaism at this time is that magic and writing is inherently magical. Writing special, we're going to use the fancy term here, woches magicae, or words of power. Is it true that angels don't understand Aramaic? No, they do. Demons don't understand Aramaic. That's why you can trick them with it. Yeah, woches magicae, words of power. And that a large part of Judaism was simply they call it manipulating the alphabet, right? Simply doing, God spoke the world into existence with words. Therefore, speech is inherently a magical act, right? I like that they bypass the moral question and go straight to the practical, but should you get a lawyer about it? Exactly. Well, it's like getting a lawyer about it is that's what actually, that's where the rubber meets the road, my friend. You can philosophize about all this all day, but it's like, if it's a problem, you'll need a lawyer for it, and if you got a lawyer for it, we'll figure it out. And writing is basically speech, exactly. So, if you dig up a copy of the Sefer HaRazim, it's many copies of it are available online for free. A lot of the ways that the spells take shape is like instructions for making amulets. That's a huge one. It's like they were often made of non-ferrous metal, like bronze or tin, and then special Voces Magicae were etched into them. Or it was another common one was special ritually prepared papyrus, right? There's a type of ritually pure papyrus that Egyptian scribes would use for writing things. And that was another common thing for protective amulets in this period. And we have a lot of these. And so the average Jew at this period, let's say your son got sick, right? You were allowed to abjure an angel, to say, like, angel, I'm doing a spell and I'm praying to you and I'm asking you to come down and heal my son. And you're allowed to go to some scribe and maybe pay him some money to build you a protective amulet. And you can take that home and put it on your son. But you're not allowed to do that to God. You're not allowed to say, God, come down here and heal my son. And that's kind of how... So that's really the difference between a lot of... Wait. From a quick Google search, apparently there's a bit in the Talmud with a guy who says angels don't speak Aramaic. It's immediately refuted in the text, but it's stuck in Jewish folklore. Ah, I see. So one of the most interesting things that you see about Jewish literature of the time is, like, you'll see like somebody comes to a rabbi and says, like, am I allowed to interact with the Goes? Am I allowed to, like, deal with these, like, Hellenic sorcerers? Am I allowed to, like, interact with the Magoi? And the rabbi will say, no, absolutely not. But there are like Jewish scribal people who will do basically the same service, but within the confines of acceptable Judaism, right? There's a lot of, like, no, that's magic. But if you go to like this rabbi and have him do this thing, it's basically the same, and that's not magic. That's allowed. Which begs a lot of very interesting questions about, like, well, is this just the, like, is the rabbi saying that these are equivalent practices? Or does he consider it like this is a better version? This is something completely different and not alike at all. It's only alike in the effects that it produces, but the underlying cosmology, the underlying metaphysics are completely different, you know? I think it's very easy to overdraw the comparison there between, like, oh, this is just the Second Temple period version of the Goes. They just had, like, a pseudo-rabbinical version of it. And I'm not sure if that's true. I think you could argue either way. Note check. Again, kind of reminds me of, like, no, don't go paying some traveling mage to remove your evil eye. Get blessed by a priest instead. Yes. Would that distinction have anything to do with the concept of ritual impurity, or is that a different thing? It is possible, Garrus Monolith. I don't know enough of the Talmud to say for sure, although a lot of Talmudic discussions of magic deal with ritual impurity. Like, A common thing that a lot of Jews had to carry at the time was like, a little bit of scripture wrapped in a leather bag, right? Important, ritually pure object that you're supposed to keep on you a lot. I forget what they're called, but they have a word in Hebrew. And a lot of the Talmud deals with, like, what happens if you get your little, like, leather scriptural thing. Like, what happens if it gets ritually impure? What makes it ritually impure? How impure does it become if you do these impure things to it? And how can you fix that? There's a lot of discussions of that, but I'm not entirely sure I'm not entirely sure how much that connects with discussions of magic at the period. Like, okay, getting your little leather bag ritually impure, I'm not sure if they would describe that as kishuf, right? Always forget that exorcists are, like, real and still real. Yeah. That's another big thing that, like, Western esotericism gets from the Jewish culture of the time is exorcisms. That was a huge thing in Judea, huge thing in Jewish culture. And as I was brushing up on Gideon Bohawk's text, Ancient Jewish Magic, for this stream, he brought up a great question of, like, we see exorcisms as, like, a magical thing now. I think that's pretty common. Like, if you ask the average person these days, is exorcism magic? They would say, yeah, of course. Like, there are like RPGs where you can play a wizard with an exorcism spell. But Gideon Bohawk points out, like, okay, were they considered magic back then, or were they considered something more akin to a doctor? Like, is that something a doctor does? And he says yes. He says, like, back then, being an exorcist was a bit more like being a doctor. And it's important to understand ancient Jewish magic through that lens. You got exorcised once? It was by Protestants, though? Yeah, they love their exorcisms. Sorry, I've gotten so into this discussion, I've just stopped playing Warframe. I think that's fine. I think you guys can put up with that. This talk of theology and the difference between exorcism and magic reminds me of LARP theology. I don't know what that is. How did people in the rest of the Hellenized Roman world view Jewish magicians? That is an excellent question, blessed felines. The Jews, kind of like now, the Jews, kind of like now, had a reputation for magic. This is partially because, like, got a lot of Jews traveling around. A lot of them are like, okay. I have a native friend who, I have a Native American friend, right? Who, is like, treats their native religion with a certain degree of skepticism, right? They don't really believe in gods or spirits or anything, but they understand, like, yeah, this is a pretty, like, culturally important thing. I don't want to disrespect these rituals. I understand, like, the context that being a Native American exists in within modern America. At the same time, they are working a minimum wage job. And every once in a while, someone will say, like, can you come along and sing, like, a traditional song for us? It's like, I'll pay you $300. It's like that TikTok. And he's just like, yes, absolutely. I think there were a lot of Jews doing stuff like that, where they were like, yeah, I'll sell you an amulet. It's whatever. Like, there are plenty of secular Jews at the time, and they were perfectly willing to, like, produce magical goods for a paycheck. Totally respectable thing. I have Romani ancestry. I understand it. Because of that, within the Greco-Roman world, Jews had a particular association with magic that was sometimes positive, sometimes quite negative, sometimes negative to the point of bloodshed. I'm sure we all understand that, right? Continued well into modern times. Well, one specific Jewish magician made some big waves, I hear. Actually, there's a whole chapter in ancient Jewish magic that discusses the concept of was Jesus a magician, and Professor Bohak comes to the conclusion that no, Jesus would not have been considered a magician for the time. He basically defines magic as a field of technical knowledge that you can teach someone, right? Magic is something you can learn and teach to another person. You could not learn to walk on water. Jesus could not teach you to walk on water. He had unique powers due to his holiness and special place in the cosmology. That was, for the time, a different, recognized caste of person. You know, like the idea of being a charismatic Jewish holy man that had holy powers because of your special relationship with Jewish God. You could be a Roman and say like, oh yeah, there's these traveling Jewish guys that have a special relationship to some god and they can do special stuff because of it. It's obviously, because they're foreigners, it's way worse than our awesome Roman magic, but that's a thing that happens, right? It's not, and they wouldn't necessarily consider it Magoi, right? Wasn't Jesus one of several similar charismatic prophet figures? Yes, and some of them did engage in what the Greco-Roman world would have considered Magoi, or Magia. I remember reading them having an association with some specific type of magic. I want my music back, thank you very much. Yes, famously Simon Magus, Simon the Magician, was associated with the more normative Greco-Roman magic. Although Simon Magus probably would not have described himself as a magician. Interesting note, a decade or so ago, the bishop there put out a statement warning against folk magic practices like the evil eye. You have no idea what forces you're dealing with. It unfortunately kind of killed a lot of anthropological work. Oh, okay, that's part of a larger discussion. So, okay. So a lot of this informs like folk magic on the ground. But as we head out through history, a lot of this stuff isn't necessarily going to come up a lot. The things that are going to come up are the Enoch literature, which honestly deserves its own stream, and the Hechelo and Merkava literature, which means palaces and thrones, conversely. Now, these are texts that also show up in the rabbinical period. They are often attributed to legendary rabbis like Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Ben Yosef, who do miraculous things. And they talk about, like, these are fantastic, by the way. Like, if you like weird, evocative, mystical literature, this is par excellence, the gold standard of Western esotericism. They talk about rabbis ascending past these spiritual palaces, past these treasure houses guarded by angels, in which they have to pass through doors and give the various angelic guards secret passwords that are also Wokas Magicae, so that they can raise themselves up through the castles of divinity and, you know, speak to God himself or interact with God himself in some way. Although the earlier literature talks about ascending up through these various palaces, but the later literature describes it as descending. They descend into the garden, into the garden of the divine literature, and they are like very complex and interesting. But it's not like descending like to the underworld. It's descending almost inward. Like you kind of like go inward into your soul, and you find the divine palaces, and you're trying to find the garden of mysticism and shit. It's so cool. There's so much in the Hechelo and Merkava literature that I do not know enough about the like rabbinical culture at the time to really explain in a Twitch stream, but later esotericists would be fascinated by these. Like, it's clear from the time that like this type of literature was quite popular. Like if we go back to the Sefer HaRazim, the first magical book, the version of it that we have in the Cairo Geniza is a medieval copy. It's like from the 10th century, and it's clear that it was probably a Greek original that was translated into Greco-Arabic, like probably by an Arabic Christian reader, which was then translated again into a different language. Like, it's clear that this, if anyone wants to learn about this descent aspect of just, okay. It's clear that this literature, this like mystical ascent literature, although that's more true for the Sefer HaRazim than the Hechelo and Merkava literature, it's clear that this literature was like, it was both influenced very heavily by the surrounding Hellenic cultures, like all the various like proto-Christian and Zoroastrian sects. Like there was elements of a lot of other religions and cultures in these things that was then heavily Judaized. And then I think this is my I have a take here, partially because of those remnants of non-Jewish cultures in them then became popular outside of Judaism, which then, like, you see the influences outside of it, which the rabbis also then pull in and, like, constantly, like, reinterpreting and re-adding these Gentile religious concepts and reapplying them to Judaism in a very interesting way that makes them these, like, historically layered, like, deliciously rich texts to study. Like, I could spend, a month just talking about a single Merkava text. There's that much historical density in these that I would never be able to give them, like, a real justice in a Twitch stream like this, with me just, like, talking about the notes that I have from the scholars. Like, truly, truly fascinating stuff. If you want a better introduction to them, I would highly recommend Justin Sledge's series on Jewish mysticism. Excellent stuff. Now, something so beautiful about these texts, so ancient, already being so rich in history. Yeah, no, totally. If I recall correctly, medieval Jews did similar things to Arthuria also, although that was less wizardly and more literary. Yes, no, it's like the constant, like, re-Judaizing of non-Jewish, like, literature and religious concepts is, like, one of the most enduring things about Judaism and Jewish esoterica specifically. It's wonderful. It's like, specifically, a lot of themes and concepts, the scholarly term for it is, like, because the Enoch literature, the Hechelo and Merkava literature they're not preserved in the most cohesive ways. Like, they're not quite fragments, but they're not quite whole sources either. The term the archaeologists use for it is microforms and macroforms, right? It's like one spell isn't necessarily a fragment because it shows up in multiple texts. It's a microform that is used to assemble macroforms that make up the broader Merkava and Hechelo traditions, right? And so a lot of these microforms are assembled from non-Jewish sources that are then Judaized and then fit into a broader Jewish context. And so because of that, they're very popular with non-Jewish esotericists. It's like John Dee loves all this ascent literature. If you read, like, his diaries and all his shit with the like John Dee's unique cosmology with all the ascents through the 30 Aethirs and whatnot is clearly the result of somebody who has both studied the Merkava and Hechelo literature as well as its non-Jewish influences and the things that the Hechelo literature influenced in later, like, Christian and Islamic esotericism. Like, you see repeated themes of these microforms from the Hechelo literature in John Dee, which then fucking the Golden Dawn was also obsessed with John Dee, and a lot of their mystical ascent literature is based on his shit, which is also based on like the Jewish ascent literature, which is based on all the things that were in the air around it, and it's all built on itself in such a wonderful and interesting and historically rich manner. It's like people talk, like you can get very bogged down in discussions of like appropriation in Western esotericism, but this is not one of them, right? There are definitely discussions to be had about like the Renaissance esotericists and like the 15th century and like the Pugio Fugilis and everything, but this is more like this thread tracing the Hechalo literature to modern mystical ascent literature is one of the defining threads of Western esotericism as a whole, because it really speaks to how everyone is reading everyone else and constantly reapplying their own theology to it, and it creates this wonderful layer cake built of like everyone is reading everyone else and constantly reinterpreting it through the lens of their own theology. Which it's not quite syncretism. It's kind of a different thing. It's like a constructive, it's like an interesting, historically layered, constructive, like they're kind of building something without wanting to build something. It's fascinating. Are you familiar with Sholom's Jewish Gnosticism, Merkabah, Mysticism? Okay, yes, I am. I disagree with it. A lot of the later Jewish, like, okay. Chat, what we're talking about here, the scholar of Jewish esotericism is a guy named Gershom Scholem. He was writing back in the 70s, so his, it's like ideological spoliation. It's like religious crossbreeding. It's so fascinating. But Scholem basically theorizes that there was a Jewish Gnosticism that influenced Christian Gnosticism, like a pre-Christian Jewish Gnosticism. I don't necessarily agree. I've read some dissenting scholarly opinions about that, saying that there's like no real evidence that there was, like, it's a theory that doesn't really have any evidence to back it up. But I also think Scholem, like, okay, Scholem is working. Okay. Let me word this correctly. Scholem is pulling from like rabbinical and priestly sources. Like that's where a lot of Gnosticism comes from. It's like these are like Roman bishops that were like Greco-Roman bishops that were getting a little weird with their theology. I think Scholem, a lot of these guys considered themselves more Jewish than I think a lot of scholars of esotericism really expect. Or if the people writing Christian Gnostic literature definitely considered themselves Christians. Jesus features very heavily in Gnosticism. But I think they were trying to sell Christian Gnosticism to people who still considered themselves Hellenized Jews, right? I think the scribal caste, like the priest caste, considered themselves Christians. They considered themselves Christians, but the people in their flocks did not necessarily consider themselves Christians. Like they were still considered themselves Jewish, because remember, it's not just a religion, it's an ethnicity as well. Like, that's some crazy syncretism. Yes. Well, this is maybe the most syncretic era of Western religion, right? So, okay, while I don't agree that Scholem's Jewish Gnosticism theory is like, I don't 100% agree with it, but I think early Christian Gnosticism was more Jewish than people really give it credit for. Does that make sense? Like, the people on the ground, the non-scribal caste, were a lot more Jewish than people might expect. I don't have any evidence for that. That is literally just a take. The only evidence that I have for that is the fact that even well into the 3rd century, you had like Christian bishops were still saying shit like, stop calling yourselves Jews, we're Christians now. It kind of seems like we're trying to retroject modern categories onto people who could well have not applied into modern divisions. Yes, I think there's a lot of that. I also like don't blame Sholem for theorizing that. Like, it's a good theory. There were a lot of wacky theories about what do we do after the temple cult is gone. It's totally reasonable that maybe there was a group of Jews who weren't too happy with the destruction of the temple cult and were like, maybe God's evil, right? That's a totally reasonable assertion, partially because that's kind of what Gnosticism was. Why are we talking about Helen Keller? Why would Christian Gnosticism have been easier to sell to Jewish Christians rather than Christianity, or would it have been? I don't think, like, okay. Blessed Feline. Picture the average American Christian, right? How aware is that guy of sectarian conflicts that are currently happening within Christianity, right? Like, the average American who goes to church, do you think they're very aware of, like, sectarian conflicts happening in the broader Baptist world? No, they don't care, right? I think a very similar thing is true. Like, in the same way that, yes, there were official scribal prohibitions on magic within Judaism, but a lot of Jews were just like, I'm not doing magic, it's fine. You know? Like, the difference between what the scribal caste is saying and what the people on the ground conceive of themselves as is always very different, right? People are a lot less invested in the legal minutiae of their religion than the scribal caste is. Were there non-Jewish sources that were influencing Christian Gnostics? Oh yes, my friend. The Christian Gnosticism is influenced by like Hellenic philosophy, Zoroastrianism. Like, you got to remember that like the ancient Mediterranean was extremely metropolitan. Everyone was kind of reading each other. Weird, unrelated question. Would you consider syncretism as a religious belief in itself? No. It's a method of syncretism is a method of understanding religious documents. It's like, no one is a syncretist as a religion. Like, no one would say, I'm a syncretist, I'm not a Christian. Like, that's not really a thing. Also, it's like, religions are just way more porous. Like, cultures mongrelize way more than, like, the easiest way to describe history to people is describing cultures as these like monoliths that never blend or interbreed with each other. No, cultures are constantly interacting and taking shit from each other and learning shit from each other and being influenced. Cultures mongrelize. It's what they do. Like that's like the purpose of a culture, is to enrich themselves through interacting with new things. And I think religions are the same way. Isn't chaos magic just, I'm a syncretist, not a Catholic? Chaos magic is like barely a religion. I just read a really interesting thing about how Korean Christianity took on a lot of previously extant ancestor rituals. Yeah, no, that happens all the time. Like, exactly. I would not want to live in the ancient Mediterranean for a variety of reasons, but I would spend like a year in a library in some urban domus. I would want to hang out in the... Every time I think about like going back in time to hang out somewhere, it's like, I want to be a scribe in the Arab world. It sounds like the best place to be. Just like every time you hear about like, here's the shit that was happening in Europe, and then here's the shit that was happening in the Near East, and it's like, The fucking Baghdad always had it way nicer. Like, it's just like always the W. They'd be so catty. They're every time I read about like Arab scholars, they're always locked the fuck in. They're always like, no, we're just here to do scribe shit. I need to smoke with Miriam the Alchemist. You know she would invent a new bong. Venice probably stank like shit. Exactly. It's like, I at least want to hang out with the people that wash their damn hands. You know? I will be a professional scribe soon. Awesome. Whew. All right. I think that's about it for... I think that's about my entire spiel for, like, early Judaism. You guys got any questions? Renowned scholar C.T. Kelly, all Los Angeles, in the Baghdad House of Wisdom. Favorite amulet? My favorite one is the lamellar mentioned in those weird mistranslations of the Emerald Tablet. Yeah, before we wrap up, you guys got any questions? Who's the most famous guy in ancient Jewish magic? Rabbi Akiva. Easy. Why have you got redirection on Nidus? Never played Nidus before, dog. Anyone else hear about that Jewish temple fort that was apparently burning cannabis on an altar? I did not hear about that, no. I just don't got shields. I didn't know that. I just put these on. You ever seen a cursed tablet where a woman gets a man to love her? Yes, there's at least one in the PGM. They're definitely more rare compared to like dudes wanting the affection of a woman, but it happens. There are cursed tablets that are like a woman wants a man to look at her or something. There is a lot of cursed tablets are less like, I want this person to love me. A lot of them are like, I want these motherfuckers to break up. Also, actual question. What were the actual mechanisms of magic in early Judaism? We kind of touched on that. It was basically amulets because they had words of power, and words of power are very big in Judaism. And the other one is abjuring angels, right? You can command angels to do stuff. That was kind of allowed. Yes, a lot of them were like, lose your court case, and I want this idiot to crash his chariot now! Yes, there is a lesbian curse tablet. I forget which one it is, but there is a lesbian curse tablet in the PGM. How do you command angels? Speech. Yeah, you basically you have to write it in a special language, use special words. Remember that like knowing how to read was very rare at this time, and so being able to manipulate words was considered magic by a lot of people. As well as being especially, like, mythologically important within Judaism. How do I curse my twink? Urgent. Well, there's... check out the PGM, dog. There's a lot of spells in there. I want that twink obliterated. I invoke Jesus and Adonai and Zeus and Thoth. I think Dr. Sledge has a video about the lesbian curse tablet. I'll find the lesbian curse tablet. I'll post it in the Discord. Also, by the way, hey, thank you for showing up for the stream, everyone. I'm able to do stuff like this because you guys so kindly support me on Patreon. You can use !Patreon to throw me some money. I'd really appreciate it. It's how I make most of my money. No pressure. And hey, if you're not in the Discord, we have a little book club going on. A lot of very smart people that talk about magic and history and whatnot. So you can use the command !Discord to get on in there. And if that doesn't work, there's a link in my pinned post on Tumblr. All right. All right. Any last additions, everyone? All right. Yay! Thanks for the stream. It was fun, everyone. Let me go see who's live right now. Maybe we can throw you over to someone. Ah, Trog is live. Here, go play with Trog. What's our raid? Okay, what's our raid message? At this point, there wasn't much overlap with Pythagoras with geometry being powerful or whatever. No, that was also a thing, but the Jews just didn't deal much with that, as far as I'm aware. All right, the raid message is fills your field with cucumbers. All right. Bye, everyone. It was fun.